Hi,
Hi, how are you?
are you Jen?
I am. How are you?
You.
Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Is
How
everybody
was
bicycling while they do this?
and no, that would be really good. We could ask that a lot.
That's what I thought
No,
would be happening. I thought everybody would be on their bike.
that would be we'll have to try that one time. Yeah, I would have to be really work at that to be able to have a full discussion and ride at the same time. Yeah, no, we're just generally moms that love our Peloton and love books. That's kind of how it started. So, yeah. It's really fun. How do you have a Peloton? Oh,
No, I
no.
did do a soul cycle once, but I almost died. So no,
Yeah.
I do Zoom ballet. I've been doing that all through the pandemic. It's
Oh,
great.
wow, that's fun.
Yeah.
Great core work.
Yeah, but it's not like bar. It's real ballet. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
plie, tendu, dégagé. It's the real thing.
yeah.
It's been good.
Still great core work.
I guess it is. I remember when I started, I thought, how is this going to work? But I actually prefer it to the in studio because it's shorter, and also you can check your email in the middle, and nobody
Right.
knows.
So funny, so funny, so
Anyway,
funny. Well, we it's 8:01, so we like to be really prompt because I know your time is precious. So,
not doing anything else.
everybody can continue to join, but they're muted, just so you know. But they can continue to join, so it's no problem if we get started.
Okay.
Um, so, good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm so excited to be speaking with Jean Hanff. Is it Korelitz? Am I saying
Yes.
that right? Yes. Okay, good. Regarding your acclaimed novel, The Plot, which I have right here. And a few quick thank yous before we start. A big thank you, as always, to Jennifer Clonch, who is my moderator for the group, and Lindsay Gorbaki, who helps us behind the scenes. And then, of course, thanks to all of our moms who have already read the novel and are here tonight, and have recommended it to their friends. Or thanks to those that are joining after the fact, listening to our recording because you couldn't join us live. And then last but not least, thanks to you, Jean, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with the Peloton's Mom Book Club. So let's get started.
Okay. Well, but before we get started, can I just ask Laura Beth Vitor, is that your real room or is that a picture?
No, this is my room. This is
Oh
like
my
a,
God. It's
That's
yeah.
amazing.
And
gorgeous.
that's me many years ago at Rice University.
Wow. Wow. Where is that room?
It's a study, it's a library in my house. So,
But I mean, what part of the country is that?
oh, I'm in North Carolina.
Wow.
That's
Stunning.
beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
beautiful, beautiful. That's awesome. Um, so Jean, we always like to start our chats learning a little bit about your path that led you to becoming a writer. Do you want to share a little bit of your story or how you got
Sure.
to where you are
I
today?
can do this short, medium, or forever, but I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that this is the only thing I ever wanted to do. I was one of those really annoying people that like you met in college that knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing. I knew it way before college. Um, I still have very few marketable skills. I'm very good at making chocolate dipped strawberries because my first job was in a gourmet chocolate store. But that's it. Writing novels and chocolate dipped strawberries. That's the sum total of my marketable skills. So um, I wrote poetry only until about age 25 because I was too scared to try to write fiction. It just seemed so impossible. Um, and I did actually publish a book of poems, but uh, I, I married another poet, and he was like a lot better at it than I am, and I think that weirdly made it easier for me to leave poetry because it was just no contest. Not that we were competing, but he's a Pulitzer Prize winning poet. He teaches at Princeton. He's the poet in the family, and I started trying to write fiction in the mid 80s, and my first two novels were rejected everywhere. And then I kind of made this decision that I was going to write a book that somebody would publish. It was a very kind of, I just had to do it. It was necessary to get published. And so I wrote a book that I'm sitting actually next to the shelf where all my books are, so I can show you the book that I wrote. If I don't knock everything down, I wrote this book, A Jury of Her Peers. It's not a literary novel. It was very much a legal thriller. I thought it was an aberration. I thought I just had to do this in order to get published, and then I would go back to writing literary fiction. But what I discovered was that I really like plot, and I like reading a book with plot, and I liked putting it together. And it was kind of like, you know, somebody who aspires to be, you know, Monet decides he really likes finger painting, you know. I don't mean to disparage the genres. For me, that's what it felt like, oh my God, I really like this. So for the rest of my career, which is now my 8th novel will be published next spring, I've kind of zipped back and forth between literary and commercial. And I think that's probably a big part of the reason why it took me so long to find an audience, because people would, you know, like a book of mine, and then they would go out and read the next book and think, what is this? So, but I can't apologize for it, because I wrote every book that I wrote for a reason, and it's not like I have 10 books to choose among. You know, you get one book at a time, and you can say, no, I don't want to write that. But I didn't feel that I had that option. I mean, you have to kind of write through what you have in hopes of getting to the next thing. So 8 novels, I would say 2 have kind of been viewed as thrillers. Although I never thought of them that way. I thought of them as, you know, literary fiction, but plot driven. So there I am. I'm a woman without a genre.
And were you an English major in college, or did you study writing? Yeah.
But I didn't study writing. I went to Dartmouth in the 80s, and Dartmouth had a poet. I took classes with the poet, but it didn't really writing wasn't a priority then. It's much better now. But other universities kind of were faster to get that going. Princeton, for example, from the 1940s on, Princeton had incredibly important writers working with undergraduates. So, we were just a little late to the game, I think.
And that's where your husband works now, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when you sat down to write the plot, complex novel, can you share a little bit of what that looked like? Like, did you have an outline of the outline of the outline? Did you have a clear path beginning to end?
Well,
it's so challenging with a story within a story.
Very much so. And I would be remiss if I did not thank Google spreadsheets. Without Google spreadsheets, this novel could not have been written. But the whole backstory of this book was so strange that I think when you understand where this thing came from, you will understand how insane the whole thing was. So I was writing a very different book. I was writing, in fact, the book that I'm literally over there on my couch putting in the final edits is coming out, is going to be published next spring. I was writing that book, and it wasn't going very well. And my editor, who I love and trust, kept rejecting it. And that was quite devastating. I kept rewriting it. She kept rejecting it. And in January of 2020, I was in her office having a pretty grim editorial meeting with her, in which she was explaining to me again why she wasn't accepting it. And I was pretty unhappy. I was a pretty unhappy person, because not only could I not get this novel together, but I was getting I was very unhappy about something I was reading about in the paper that was happening in China. And as somebody who, you know, I've read a lot of books about various apocalyptic scenarios, and I just felt like this is bad. And nobody felt this way except for me. Like everybody could say to me, "Oh, stop! It's going to be fine." And but I didn't think so. And so I was not. I only bring this up because I think it kind of destabilized me enough that what happened next happened, and that was, here I am having this depressing meeting with my editor. I'm really, really nervous about something that's happening in the world. And I just heard myself say to her, "Oh, I have this other idea." And I just started kind of gushing out this idea about this washed up writer who appropriates something. And in all of his, and I'm assuming you guys have read the book. I'm not gonna hit you with all the spoilers, but in all of his anxieties about his own bad move, whatever it may be, whether you feel that Jake is wrong or not, he doesn't really stop to wonder where the person that he's taken it from took it from. So his anxieties are basing in the wrong direction. And he's terribly afraid that somebody will come out of the woodwork and accuse him of something, and then somebody does. And the whole book becomes this kind of race for him to figure out who this person is before he can be discredited and have his career cut short and be humiliated, and all of the things that we all know happen to not just to writers but to everybody. I mean, just think of James Fry. James Fry stole from himself, and look what happened to him. I'm not a fan of James Fry, but I mean, the guy ripped off his own story, and look what happened. So anyway, so we're still in the middle of this meeting, and my editor says to me, why don't you put aside this book that you really need some relief from, you really need a break from, and why don't you write this other thing? It sounds really great. I didn't have the whole plot of the plot to share with her. I had that, and then I told her what this brilliant idea was that he was stealing or appropriating. And when I did that, she just went crazy, and that was really reassuring, because I was worried that somebody else had written this story. I mean, I've read a lot of books, but I haven't read every book in the world. And she has. She's read every book in the world. So when she got excited, I was really excited. So I thought that was a great idea. And then she helpfully bought both books, which, remember, I had walked into that meeting unable to sell one book, and now I had two books, both of which I had to write. It's not like it was not without its problems. But then, as we all know, a month later, the world just stopped, and I was in at our house in upstate New York with my husband, also a writer, and this dog, and really, 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 really pissed off, and really, really scared. Not at all happy that I had been proven right. Not at all happy at all. But these circumstances had all kind of coalesced in such a way that I sat down and wrote this novel in 4 months, which is an absurd thing to do. And I give you permission to disparage any book that somebody tells you was written in 4 months. I certainly would. And I never, ever want this to happen again, because I never want any of us to be in the circumstances that were necessary for this to happen. But that's what happened. So when you say, did I plot it out, and was it, did I know it all? No, I barely knew where I was going, but it was so propulsive that I never questioned whether I was making the right decisions. They were all the right decisions. And that is not how I usually write. I mean, usually it's like, oh my God, this was just,
Amazing. It's
Yeah.
funny, we've talked obviously to a lot of authors this year, and several were writing during the pandemic, and it sounds like for you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was almost an outlet from the real world of what was going on, and it was, in 4 months, that means you were pretty voracious in your writing, I would think,
I
to be
was.
able to jam that out. So you must have, kind of redirected your frustration at the world into that laptop,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe that's a
I mean,
positive that really came out of
not
it.
to get political. I mean, everything's political, but it wasn't just my fear that terrible things were happening. It was my rage. I mean, I was so angry at how this had been mishandled. I'm still angry. But the fear, the rage, back to the fear. I mean, I would like to spend all day ricocheting back and forth between fear and rage. It's a terrible way to be. And I'm incredibly grateful that I had a job, and I had a deadline, and I had a project, and it was going well. And I was like every time I finished a chapter, I'd send it to my parents, who were locked in their apartment, couldn't go out. And that was something that, we were all sharing and looking forward to. I mean, I'm so grateful that I had this to do.
Yeah. And it's good because some of the writers, or the authors we've spoken to, they really struggled. They couldn't focus. They were.
Oh, sure. I totally understand.
All over the board. So
No,
it seems to be polarizing.
Exactly the right moment. And I remember, after 9/11, a lot of people were like, I can't continue to write this book about a meet cute, or, the world had just changed. And I was one of the people who stopped writing the book that I was writing. It's probably the only time I've abandoned a book in the middle. When the world just shifts, it's hard to maintain a sense of, the importance of the story that you're doing. It really has to be a story that either takes you away or settles something inside your mind to help you get through the day or something. But for whatever reason, this really, it was just perfect for me.
That's awesome. Excellent. So at the start of the book, Jake is plagued with the struggles to come up with a follow-up novel. And he had some critical success, but not necessarily success with the masses. But is that something that you encountered, or because that seemed to be so, he was so plagued with it, and you really kind of felt the struggles that he was in. And so were you kind of speaking from personal experience, or someone or is that, I'm sure that's a real pressure after you've had a little bit of success.
Thank you for correctly describing his circumstances, because you wouldn't believe how many reviews have said something like, he was a one-hit wonder, or he can't recapture the great success of his first book. I never said that. He got one nice little review, which is great. I mean, we writers were, desperate for these little crumbs of recognition. But it is completely untrue suggest that Jake was at all successful. He was, I think I even said this in the book. Readers are attracted to that first novel. They want to discover the new voice. They're not so interested in the second, the fourth, the 10th. I'm like this too. I mean, if I hear of an exciting new writer, I want to rush out and read their work. But this is how people like Ann Tyler get, lost until what was her breakthrough novel, something like her 10th novel. And then everybody went rushing to read numbers 1 through 9. And I feel a little bit like that myself. Not that I'm comparing myself to Ann Tyler, but broadly, that is the way it was for me. Every novel that I published would get some very respectful reviews. One was a Book of the Month Club selection. But really, I think the proof is in the pudding. I'm sure that there's virtually nobody on this call who had ever heard of me until, Nicole Kidman was wearing her green coat on their screen. And I don't blame you, because there are lots and lots of books out there by lots and lots of writers, and you can't read them all. I can't read them all. So, and you have to hear about it before you want to read it. And the thing about publishing is that in every list, there are 2 or 3 books that get all of the oomph, all of the magical pixie fairy dust. And everybody else, they just put out there and kind of hope that some rare word of mouth thing will happen. And it doesn't happen that often.
Right. Makes perfect sense. So a lot of the authors that we've chatted with this year, and this has been enlightening to me, often work, kind of in a mini team, or they bounce ideas and storylines off contemporaries. Is that something that you do? Do you have a group of writers that you work with?
I really don't. I mean, I have wonderful friends who are writers, but the only person I send my work to is one of my best friends from college is a writer who lives in California, and she is an extraordinary reader. And she's like my editor, she's read everything. And she's just very, very astute at, picking up when something isn't working, or, when I've done something well. And I think it's important for, we're all so self-flagellating and we're so down on ourselves all the time. It seems to be an occupational hazard, at least for the women. I don't think it's true of the men. We can discuss that separately. But to find somebody who you will believe when they say, this is good, who you will not immediately just shoot that down. That's a really useful thing to have also.
Well, I asked that question because, you talk throughout the novel about, themes are repeated throughout literature, right? Going all the way back to, I think you reference Odysseus, and you certainly reference Hamlet, and, that those kind of storylines or themes repeat throughout literature, and it's kind of a gray area. Like, are you retelling the story of somebody else's story, or are you in fact blurring the lines, and have you perhaps taken somebody else's story, which in essence is the theme of the book. So I guess my question is, like, it does seem to be kind of a small fraternity of writers. You all do seem to kind of intermingle, and how do you navigate that when you think you've kind of got a little gem, and you want to get some feedback, but you don't want somebody to kind of like jump on your bandwagon and race to get it printed before you. Is that
the best answer to that is, I've forgotten the name of it was a very famous gathering of writers in the 1950s, I believe, in Oxford, England, that included J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and then a bunch of lesser known writers. So you've got these guys who are meeting in a pub once a week, and J.R.R. is given an update on the orcs, and C.S. is given an update on the rabbit and then they all go home and they work on their own stuff. I mean, there's no written rule book. There's a kind of honor. And also, J.R.R. Tolkien couldn't have written C.S. Lewis's books, and vice versa. Right. To suggest that any of us can write any books is to sort of not really understand. I mean, I could never have written any other books but the ones that I've written. And my friend Christina Baker-Klein, who teaches, unlike me, a lot of my friends teach, but thank you, the Inklings, that's right. I knew somebody would know. Christina Baker-Klein told me when we were first started, when I told her, what my book was about, she said that as a writing exercise, she once gave her class this image. There's a wedding cake in the middle of the road, and they all wrote stories that were completely different. So, I mean, that's an image. Obviously, it's not a plot, but our imaginations are free to roam. but they are not, well, except for science fiction, which I can't speak to because I don't read any science fiction, but we're all in the same planet. We're all dealing, gravity keeps us down and helium goes up and human beings are born and then they age and then they get old and then they die. These are the agreed upon parameters that we're dealing with. And within those agreements, anything can be imagined. So we don't have to just tell the same stories over and over again. You can wander far afield, but at the same time, we're also, part of those, fixed points are these stories that we've all inherited. And, it depends on which metaphor you prefer, but we're dipping into the same well. We're stepping into the same river. We don't each get our own river. I feel like I'm completely blowing this, but I think what I'm trying to say is you don't steal an idea or even a story. You steal language. And if you steal language, you go to hell. And you should go to hell. You should go to hell with all the other plagiarists, and you may steal from one another down there till the ends of time. But short of stealing language, frolic at will.
Yeah, frolic in the ideas, not the language.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense perfectly. So much of the book is set in kind of rural, some would say isolated areas, upstate New York, which for many people, their idea of upstate is 5 miles outside of Manhattan, but upstate New York, which is where I'm from.
Really? Where are you from?
Lake Placid.
Oh, wow. That is up.
Yeah, pretty far. And then you also have them in the Northeast Kingdom, which is upstate Vermont. So was there an importance for you in the remoteness of these places? And, I know you mentioned you went to Dartmouth, so that might answer a little bit of my question in that perhaps you spent some time in these places. But your descriptions of these places was so spot on. So obviously you've spent some time there or no?
Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of summers in Vermont because my husband taught at the Breadloaf School of English, which is outside of Middlebury. And so about, 15 years when my kids were little and I'm driving them all over Vermont. And I was always very taken by the town of Rutland, Vermont, because I am an old house person and I am a preservationist. And it always infuriated me on behalf of the town of Rutland, Vermont, that some idiot allowed Route 7 to go straight up the main street, destroying the town. And I just thought, well, the thing about Rutland is everybody goes through it, but is anybody actually from there? So I decided to make some of the characters be from Rutland. But in terms of upstate New York, because the house where I was writing the book was in upstate New York, I just decided to set one chapter, the chapter where Jake is working for basically a hotel that's pretending it's an artist colony, in my town. And everything else kind of flowed from that, because if Jake is sitting down to write his version of this story, he would probably set it where he was, just as I was setting my novel where I was. And looking around in the area where Jake and I both were, he would have been looking for a kind of town that was in the back of beyond, but close enough to something that resembled or that suggested the wider world, that he could, put his story of a girl who really just wants more out of life. And that turned out to be Colgate University, which is in Hamilton, New York. So that's how all of that happened. And it's very funny. I've been hearing from all these kind of readers and book groups from Hamilton, New York, saying like, why did you set your book here in Hamilton? And, what do you know about Hamilton? Did you go to Colgate? And, so I explain all that to them. But, and then I once went to an artist colony down in Rabun Gap, Georgia. So I decided to put that there. The really weird thing is that my husband and I were both writing all through the pandemic, and there was this one week that we were both writing about Athens, Georgia. It was the weirdest thing.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah.
That come up at the dinner table?
Kind of, yeah. Like, what? You're doing what? He was writing a kind of rock and roll musical, which is set in Athens, Georgia. This was crazy.
That
Weird.
is very, very crazy. Um, so we kind of talked about this, but I just want to circle back a little bit and make sure I'm kind of clear. So like the blurred lines of fiction and storyline, were you ever kind of personally impacted by that? Do you
Yeah, actually, I mean,
feel that somebody
oh, do you mean, did
had your-
anybody ever steal from me?
Yeah.
Well, I had a roommate in college who I have no problem saying now was a sociopath. I mean, I'm almost glad that I got to observe her up close because she has inspired so many characters. Since she probably inspired my, my initial interest in liars. And I think, liars are one of the few real connections among all of my books. I'm obviously obsessed with liars. It's not something that I noticed really until I kind of looked back and said, what holds these all together? But I will say, okay, so this, well, I should show you the modern edition. This novel, The White Rose, this is my third novel, and it's the plot of an opera called Der Rosenkavalier. So Der Rosenkavalier, which was itself based on a novel, an 18th century French novel, became this opera called Der Rosenkavalier, which was first produced in 1910, around there. It's about these aristocratic Viennese, wealthy, upper class Viennese people. This version is set in New York City in the 1990s. It's set right before September 11th. It's the book that I wrote when I stopped writing the book that I had been writing. All the characters are Jewish. What are we going to say? That this is a ripoff? It's an homage. Okay. It's an homage the way West Side Story is Romeo and Juliet. Some people read this book and they're like, oh my God, it's Der Rosenkavalier. And some people have no idea, and it doesn't matter. So, and there's another book, I won't pull it out because I'll send the light toppling, that I wrote before this. The one novel before this was based on The Scarlet Letter. We all read The Scarlet Letter in school. We know where it's set. It's set in New Hampshire in the 17th century. 17th century. Okay, my version is set also in New Hampshire in 1985. You have to know, and it sort of adds something, but it's a different book. So have I done this? Yes. Do I have guilt about it? Absolutely not. This is, just think of me as Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim having my way with Romeo and Juliet. This is something that we should do. It's the interplay of stories. It's the magic, the magic 8-ball of art. I think I refer to a spin art machine in the plot, but I have zero issue with this. This is a good thing. That if somebody were to copy this sentence and put it in their novel, I would sue them. So that's the difference.
Right. Yep. That makes perfect
sense. Actually, that
Sure.
sentence. Didn't even see what sentence it was.
Right. An important sentence.
I'm sure they're all important sentences.
Yeah. I feel like this is like segueing perfectly because you just referenced lying. And when I was researching, one reviewer referred to the novel as an addictive Russian nesting doll. And I loved that analogy because there's so many layers to uncover in the book. And for me, it was the uncovering of the truth versus the lies and that theme. And you kind of just segued that it seems like all your novels have a theme of lies. So can you just kind of further expand on that a little bit in terms of truth versus lies? And ultimately, do you think that, what is your opinion of Jake?
Oh, okay.
I guess.
So,
I mean, was he wrong?
Even before, I guess, my sociopathic freshman year roommate in college, um, my mother was a therapist, and I think she loved to talk about her patients, not in a personal way. She was very scrupulous about that. But she really wanted my sister and me to know that we should not trust people, that people had charm, and people didn't care whether they're telling the truth or not. And I was such a kind of pathetic, um, I could not tell a lie. I'm not saying that to say that I was such a wonderful person, but I was incapable of lying. For example, there was this one morning when I must have realized that if I told my mother that I didn't want to that I was sick, I didn't have to go to school. And I said, I'm sick. And she said, okay, stay home from school. And by 9 in the morning, I was so overwhelmed with guilt that not only did I confess that I had lied, but I made her take me to school. I mean, she said, okay, don't worry about it. I'll go tomorrow. No, I have to go today. So, I mean, to kind of get out in the world and realize that there were so many people who just lied. They didn't care. Was just like, it's endlessly fascinating to me. And yes, you can imagine what an interesting couple of years this has been, to just see people lie. And it never gets old for me. And I think that's why I wrote about a pediatric oncologist who lied about everything. And in The Devil in Webster, which is also a novel that not many people read, which came out right before the plot, there's another liar in there. I can't say any more about that. But in the new novel, there are also liars. I mean, it's something that never gets old for me. I will never get tired of looking at people who just don't care what they say. Okay, the other part of your question was, how do I feel about Jake?
Yeah.
Well, I don't love him, but not because of what he did. I have no problem with what he did. I don't love him because he's such a drip, really. Would I want to have a beer with him? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think he's that nice, actually. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know you're supposed to make likable protagonists, but I've never been able to do that. So
Yeah.
all of my characters are jerks, I guess.
Yeah, I think it wasn't that he was unlikable for me. I just kind of felt like, okay, at some point, you gotta fess up, don't you? Kind of. I mean, like,
Now look what happens when he does. It's not so great.
Yeah, well, right. Like, yeah, it's not so good, but
It doesn't work out so well for him.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kept fucking, dude, you're just making this worse and worse and worse. Like,
I can't imagine how good a writer he is. I mean, I when it was time to write those chapters, of course I had the option of writing them poorly, but my own writerly pride wouldn't let me write them poorly. I was talking the other day to somebody about the title of his novel, The Invention of Wonder. Yeah. I know what it was. My friend Rebecca Mackay, I saw her over the weekend. She wrote The Great Believers, which is a fantastic book. And we were laughing about the title of Jake's novel, The Invention of Wonder, which is a generic title for a literary novel. It means nothing. What does that mean, The Invention of Wonder? What the heck does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. You could stick that on any literary novel and it would be like, ooh, The Invention of Wonder, ooh. So we were laughing about that.
Well, it kind of summarizes who he is, right? He's
totally. He's almost like a poser, except he's not talentless. And also, okay, here's one thing I do like about Jake. Jake never blames anybody else. He doesn't blame the other writers who've been more successful than he is. He's jealous of them, but he doesn't blame them. He doesn't blame the editors who don't support him. He doesn't blame the reading public that passes him by. He blames himself. He blames himself for not writing a good enough book. And I respect that because the world is full of people who blame other people. And I think there are plenty of writers out there who blame a lot of people. I will once, many years ago, I was invited to a party. A writer friend and I went to this party. It was full of women writers, and the name of the party was the Bitch and Wine Party. And I thought it was a joke. I thought it was, well, we're going to bitch and we're going to drink wine and it'll be fun. So we went to this party and everybody is standing around drinking and it's fun. And then somebody kind of taps a spoon against the glass and says, okay, we're going to start now. And they all start going around and talking about all of these ways that the deck is stacked against them. And, the New York Times reviews 30% more novels by men than by women. I'm not saying these things weren't true, but when I look around, I see many, many, many novels by women, reviewed by women, read by women. We are driving the fiction world. I mean, not men, we are. So I was kind of horrified, and my friend and I looked at each other like, let's get out of here. And we did. But I mean, there is that vein of people who blame everything but themselves.
Yeah.
Jake doesn't.
And I swear, everyone to the audience, I don't share my questions in advance, but I feel like Jane, you are like right on my wavelength, because there couldn't be a better segue now to, because I also read in an interview from earlier this year that you did that the importance that you state of reading bad books to help discern the difference between a good book and a bad book. So I don't want you to name any names, but do you feel there are more bad books out right now than good, or vice versa?
Well, look, I read a lot, but I haven't read everything. I think, listen, we all have to read Jacqueline Suzanne. We have to. We have to read Judith Krantz. We have to read Danielle Steele. They're fun. So they're not the most gifted writers. But, they knew how to tell a story. Nobody told a story like Judith Krantz. She was amazing. I was very sad when she died. So I feel like if you only, read the books that are being kind of held aloft as the greatest books being written today, well, you might miss something that you like, but you're going to miss a lot of fun. So, I mean, beach books, we like them. They're there for a reason.
Right. And sometimes you need it after a heavy, right?
I have this like personal pantheon of 6 books. It used to be 4, and then a few years ago I added 2 more. One of them is like you'd see it on a drugstore, that spinning rack with all the mass market things. And I will defend this book to my dying breath. It is one of the best books I've ever read. And, nobody would consider it, in the pantheon of literary fiction at all. So there you go.
Okay, well, you're going to save that because you're going to tell it. Yeah, I know. Jennifer Kenny wants to know. We're going to ask that at the end, Jen, as we always do. So we're going to get it out of you. Okay. So kind of switching gears, we always like to ask this question, and now I really want to ask it of you. Any advice? We have a lot of group members who are kind of budding authors, moms, that are maybe home with their children right now, but, trying to get going in writing. And do you have any specific advice or general advice you'd like to share with them on how to get started, or anything, process?
Well, I didn't write a book that was published until I was home with my infant. The 2 books I'd written when I had all the time in the world were not published anywhere. They were rejected all over the world. And I remember saying to my agent at that time, who's still a friend, I said, well, that's it. I'm about to have this baby, and that I've blown all my chances, and I'm running, I won't have any time. And she said, maybe, but I've had a lot of clients who suddenly got really organized when they had kids. And, maybe that'll be you. And I thought, no, that won't be me. But it was me. And because it was right after the very first day that the babysitter arrived. It was the first time I'd ever had to pay somebody so I could write. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a book somebody will publish. And I did. So it all got very focused for me. And nobody was more surprised than me. So I would say, in addition to continuing to read all the good books and the bad books. Okay, here's what I'd say. There's something really, really great about being a writer and not, for example, a gymnast or a ballet dancer. And that is, if you haven't made it as a gymnast by the time you're 20, it's over. You're done. But we get better and we have time. So write a book and then maybe put it aside and write another book. And I'm not saying it's easy to put down something you've spent a couple of years working on. It's maybe like the most excruciating thing you'll ever do, but it may be what you have to do. It may be that you have to write a bad book before you can write a better book. And if, the editors of the world do not jump up and down with your first book, learn from that and write a better book. I personally advise against self-publishing. A lot of people do it, but I'm old-fashioned, and I think that if you're writing literary fiction or even a thriller, it's very hard to come back from that. It's hard to, unless you write a book that is so wildly successful that the publishers come to you and they give you an offer. But I think it's actually, in the long run, it's better to write a better book. I did it.
Awesome. Yep. That's awesome advice. So your next novel, The Latecomer, will be, I can say that name?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay. Yeah. It's
The
like a
cover
known
is
thing.
even published now. It's exciting. It's great.
Oh, okay. So I think it's out in April 2022. Is that still
Yeah,
the
they
rough
changed it to
timeline
the
that I
end
saw?
of May. Yeah.
Okay.
it's the end of
Okay.
May.
So I
You're
heard
going
you
to ask me what it's
reference it
about, and I'm
a little
so
bit.
not good at. Oh my God, it is so hard to talk about this book. In fact, you guys can be like my sounding board and help me figure out how to answer that question, because it's not like the plot. It's not like, oh, washed up writer appropriates his dead student's story and look what happens. Bad things happen. This is bigger and it's weirder, and I don't know how to answer it. Okay. Are you asking me what it's about? Should I be saying what it's about?
Yeah, I was just looking for a little teaser.
Okay.
Maybe what the book flap's going to say.
Well, I've written the jacket copy, so I know what the jacket copy is, but that's different from like a 2-sentence teaser. And that's the part I don't have it. Okay. It's about a very wealthy family in New York City with triplets. So the parents have triplets. And it's a very unhappy family in which there's a lot of loathing, a lot of mutual loathing, and a lot of secrets. And just as the triplets are about to leave home, to go off to college, the parents have another child. And this child is from a leftover embryo from the triplets. That's what the book is about.
Okay. That's a good teaser, I think.
Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it. I can tell nobody likes it. Okay,
Oh.
I got to do better.
No, you got that. I'm reading it. No, I thought it was great. I'm a twin, so now I'm curious. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, you got me. So
it's just about a family that's really, really in trouble, and how this last child is kind of the solution to the family. But there are all these plot lines, and the writer I've thought of most as I was writing it was John Irving. I mean, it has a very John Irving thing to it, but I fear that younger readers don't know who John Irving is, so it's a little concerning. Does it have liars? Yeah, it has. The whole family is based on a lie, basically, so it has a lie. It has a lie and liars. Yeah.
Okay. So you've shown a couple of them, but that was also a uncanny piece of our discussion. So if the plot was the first novel for our readers, and I'll be the first to admit this was the first book of yours that I've read, what would you recommend be next from you?
I would say The Devil in Webster. I mean, it's quite a kind of tense and twisty book of its own. It's about a woman who finds herself the first female president of a very liberal college, swept up in a student protest, and there are lots of kind of revelations and things like that. I hate to. I mean, I was so upset about the chair because it was quite close, not that close, but same kind of setting and character. That annoyed me. If you have kids who ever want to go to college, I would also suggest Admission, because Admission was made into this, but it really wasn't a comedy. And because I worked for the admissions office at Princeton, I just threw in about 10 books worth of how to get into college guides. So there's a lot of information, but it's also quite, there are revelations in that as well. There's quite a twisty plot. So don't be expecting a Tina Fey comedy, but yeah.
Okay, well, I have a budding college student, so that's good. And it's a Kindle deal right now. My moderator just posted it's $5.99 on Kindle right now. So there you go. So bonus. So we always like to end our chats asking kind of what you're currently reading or any book recommendations that you'd care to share with us. So
well, now I have to tell you what this dime store novel that I think is one of the best books I've ever read.
Exactly.
I took it down off the shelf. It is this.
Oh.
It is the Odessa File by Forsyth. It's one of my top 6 of all time. It happens to be really well written. It has a twist that made me gasp the first time I read it. And even though I don't gasp anymore when I reread it, I deeply, deeply, deeply respect it. And I'm just going to show you a new book. Hang on.
Yeah.
So this is a brand new novel by an English writer named Sophie Ward. And if any of you are my age, she's an actress. And if any of you are my age, you will probably remember her from a great movie called Young Sherlock, about young Sherlock Holmes. But she's been a working actress her whole life. And then this is her first novel, and it was longlisted for the Booker Prize, which is pretty amazing. I'm not going to say it's an easy novel. It's not. It's quite challenging, but it has some of the best writing I've ever come across. It's very, very challenging book, and you're either going to absolutely love it or you're going to go, what the heck was that? So I really recommend it. And yeah, excited to see what she writes next.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Anything else you want to share?
No, I just was expecting you all to be pedaling. That's all. I was going to go like this while we were talking.
Well, we would love to have you back when the latecomer comes out, and promote it next spring or early summer, and maybe at that time we'll try to plan to all be on our Pelotons. But generally, this is our break from our workouts.
I understand.
Yeah, this is our vice. And hopefully we're, either I'm having seltzer tonight, but, hopefully some mamas are maybe having a glass of wine and just relaxing. So no riding, but maybe one time we'll plan to do that.
I thought I was going to be like the to sort of entertain you and distract you while you were riding.
Yeah. No. So we do record these, and we share it on our YouTube page afterwards so that we can continue to recommend the plot, which we will all do. And everybody that's here tonight is saying how much they loved it. So
yeah,
we will
thank
definitely
you, Jody. I really appreciate that. And I love your screensaver thing, and you're all in plaid. That's really cute.
Yeah. So we will definitely continue to recommend this book to the group, and we get new members every day. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night.
One of the nice things about, taking 7 books to find an audience is that you're really, really, really grateful when it happens. It's the greatest thing in the world that a total stranger is reading your work and talking about it. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and you reference that in the book, actually, I think, right? On the subway.
Maybe I'm a little closer to Jake than I want to admit, but I'm much
well, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Bye.